How can you teach your kids about money? Why did one father write a book about money for his kids? And why are negotiation skills an important part of our finances? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 128th episode of the DoughRoller podcast.
Welcome to the
That's not good.
Podcast.
Technical problem. Technical alert. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. Today, we're going to talk about children, our children, your children, my children, and how we can teach them about money. And it's something that I'm not sure if I've succeeded or failed. I'll let you know in 20 or 30 years. You know, it's although I tell you, it's painful. You hate to see your children make mistakes. You know, and do you step in and prevent them from making a mistake? Do you let them make the mistake so they can learn? And, you know, when it comes to money, it's a tough thing. You know, our daughter has a job. She's heading back to college in a couple of months, but she's home at the moment working, and she is saving. She does save money, so I have to give her a lot of credit, but man, she can shop. And she got a paycheck, and she came in the house with, I'm surprised she could carry all of the shopping bags, shoes, purses, you know, and not that there's anything wrong with going out and buying some nice things now and again, but I kind of cringe and I think, you know, have I gone wrong somewhere? Is this just something that she needs to learn on her own? Although, again, I've got to give her credit. She does save money from every paycheck. And that's something that she and I talked about, kind of negotiated when she got her first job. And she's done well. She has saved some money. In fact, she's managed to save several $1,000s, and I think eventually we'll end up buying a car. And so, you know, that's very good. But boy, you see him make mistakes. You know, our son, you know, he of course in boot camp now, he can't spend any money to spend, but he worked hard before he went into the Marines. He worked very, very hard and had a great job. Worked with handicapped children, and it was a tough job. But I kind of cringed there too, because he was frankly like I was at his age. He spent every dime he made. And, you know, again, you wonder, do I step in? What can I do? But anyway, it's, you know, for the parents out there, it's an important topic. And then, of course, as you get older, then you start handling your parents' finances. You get walloped from both sides. But that's not our topic today. Today, our topic is children and money. And I'm having on the show Rob Pivnick. Rob wrote, by the way, a lot of Robs. I don't know if you've noticed that. A ton of Robs and Roberts. So that must be the common theme here at DoughRoller. But Rob Pivnick wrote a book, What All Kids Should Know About Saving and Investing, and then in small type, and adults too. It's an interesting book in that I think adults could absolutely read this book and benefit from it. And not just kids, but he, you know, he's a father, as you'll hear, and wanted to help his own children, and so he wrote this book. And we got to talk, you know, online, just emailing, and I asked him if he wanted to come on the show and kind of share his experiences and talk about his book and why he wrote it, how he thinks it can help people. So that's what we've got on tap for today. Let's turn to the interview. Rob, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate having me.
Well, I'm glad that you could make the time to come on the show. You'd emailed me, and you had an interesting book that you wrote, kind of designed for, I guess, the younger folks and money and investing. And I thought that's a great topic. Maybe I can figure out where I went wrong with my kids. I'm not sure.
Where we all went wrong. We can learn from someone else's mistakes.
So I definitely, of course, want to hear about the book. But why don't we start off, if you could just tell folks as much or as little about who you are.
Well, so a little bit of background. So I've got 3 kids, the oldest of whom is 12 right now, and I wrote the book sort of for him. I started out without even having a plan of having a book. It was just putting down some good habits and some good teaching tools for my oldest that I could pass down to the middle one, and then when the youngest was, you know, a couple of years from now, I could pass them down to him. And it turned out to be, it came out better than I expected. So I turned it into a real book. But my background is is, I grew up here in Dallas. I was actually born in Toronto, so I'm Canadian. I'm dual citizen, so I'm Canadian and U.S. citizen. Moved down to Dallas when I was 3, and I've been here ever since. I went to law school at SMU.
Oh, no, you're a lawyer.
Yeah. Hey, you can't say that. You're one too.
I know. That's why I can say.
So I went to business school also at SMU, and I work for one of the big Wall Street investment banks now. And I kind of wanted to make sure my kids didn't get the get rich quick bug, and because I know when they get older, they're going to be hearing about everybody who did well and has some great greatest stock. It's kind of like going to Vegas. You always hear about when people do great. You never hear about when they don't do so well.
Right.
So I wanted to put this in writing for the kids.
So now, how old are your children?
My children are almost 6, 9, and 12.
Wow, that's a great age. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
It goes by quick, let me tell you.
It does. You can't learn to try and enjoy it while you can.
So, did you have parents or other folks that influenced you when you were growing up in terms of money?
Yeah, I did. My dad, who was a doctor, and you'd think he was probably a terrible investor, but he was pretty financially savvy as well. I actually think same age as my oldest. When I was 12, I invested in. I'll take you back. He matched a $250 investment in 20th Century mutual funds, which I think now is American Century, if they're still around, but 20th Century Ultra, or maybe it was 20th Century Select. But in any event, so he matched my $250, and since then I've kind of always had that savings and investing bug. And my first inclination, anytime I, since then made some money, allowance money, chores, whatever, was to want to invest it, and I've been doing it since.
Were you always a good saver, even say in high school and whatnot?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I had to put a knock on myself about that, is I probably look to save too much and don't do enough of the go ahead and enjoy what you have and enjoy life now, and don't be afraid to spend some money if it's obviously within your budget. I don't want to encourage anyone to go get a credit card debt for it. But you mentioned you read the book, and the last chapter in the book is just that. It's life is not all about money, and you should go ahead and enjoy some of what you've got. And I have to admit that was a little bit painful for me to write because I'm all about saving and investing. So the go ahead and spend it was a little bit tough for me to write.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well. So if you don't mind sharing, so what is your savings rate?
I think I'm probably right around somewhere between 15 and 20 for sure, which I mentioned in the book. Yeah. If I can give you some facts,
sure.
But in the book, so the global average I think is right around 15, and India and China top the list with somewhere north of 30% savings rate, and then the U.S. we come in pretty close to the bottom at an abysmal 4% of savings.
Why do you think that is?
I wish I knew. If I knew, then we could cure it. But I think it's probably just because we're in such a consumer-driven economy. People have to have the latest this, the greatest this, and people aren't taught to save as much. Now, I do think, though, that the rate is a little bit skewed in places like China, for example, where people have to save, and they're not necessarily saving for their retirement, but they are saving because the cost of living in some of the cities, for a small studio is several $1,000, and they have to save to get that rent. So I don't know that they're necessarily saving for retirement, so it's probably a little bit skewed. But I think it's just because people want to buy stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's a hard thing for me to figure out why the savings rates vary so much from one country to the next, and why ours has been so low. And maybe it is because we're just a consumer-oriented economy, and I don't know. But 4%. That's really low. You recommend 20%? Yes, did I get that right?
I'd say 15 to 20. I think the pros, whoever they are, say 15 to 20. So, I try and encourage my kids to eventually get that in their mind and do that. So, and that's my goal as well. If I can hit that 15 to 20% mark, I'm pretty happy.
Right. So, has your 12-year-old read the book?
He has, and I think so. Originally, I wrote it for him when he was probably around 11. It was a year ago, and it was. I think I dumbed it down too much. So it was kind of simple. So I made it towards a little bit more in depth, and I think his age is right where an age where kids beginning to get these concepts. And it's funny, as for anyone out there listening who's an author, that if your target audience is too broad, you sound a little bit disingenuous. So my target audience is probably, I'd have to say, middle grade, high school, and millennials. But truly, it goes all the way up to somebody who's 50 or 60, because I've had some of my kids' parents say, I don't know this stuff. Can I get a copy of the book? And they're, 40, 50, 55 years old. So the target audience really could be as wide as anybody who does not have this basic financial literacy skills.
Yeah, that was my take when I read it. I mean, there's a lot of good things in here, including just the way the book's formatted, pictures and other things that I think make it interesting for, like you said, middle school and say high school kids and maybe millennials. But there's a lot of deep concepts in here. I mean, that a lot of them that I talk about on this show that I think a lot of folks, older folks, maybe don't know or are just learning. So actually, I read this book and I think it actually would be a good book for a lot of people.
Well, it's funny. So if you look online, I've had this comment from several people. If you look online at the outline, and the outline, as you mentioned, has some concepts. You're like, look, no kid could understand this. This is have some complicated stuff, but as you mentioned, I wrote it with an eye towards, hey, here are the maybe complicated concepts, but if you write it in such a way and explain things in such a way where the younger readers can understand it, and you include fun things and pictures to keep them interested, it is something they can understand and they do grasp. So it's like I said, that it's got that wide swath, but I sound a little bit disingenuous saying my book's perfect for everybody because I know it's not.
Well, I guess no book is perfect for everybody. I mean, but you've even got it in the title. What all kids should know about saving and investing, but then in yellow small print you have and adults too.
Yep.
Right. So one of the things I noticed in reading the book, you're a believer in passive index fund investing.
Absolutely.
Why don't you? I mean, we've talked a lot about that on the show, but let's hear from you. Why do you think that's the best approach?
Well, I am a 99% believer in the efficient market hypothesis, and 99% believer. I leave 1% out because I'm sure there's some room for some people who have the time and knowledge and expertise maybe to create alpha and create some value. But for a vast majority of the population, is it 95%? Is it 99%? Is it just about all of them? Even Warren Buffett, who's the greatest investor that probably all of us could say we were lucky enough to see in his lifetime, said that recently, I think it was last year, when he dies, he wants his estate to invest in low-cost index fund.
Right.
So I think unless you really can dedicate, and I say this a little bit, I'll follow up, if you can dedicate your whole life to picking the great stocks and finding the ones that are going to create alpha, then maybe you're in good shape. But I say that with a little bit of hesitation because even the professionals, if you look at the stats, only 20 to 30 or 35% of professionals over the last 5, 10, 15 years consistently can beat the market. So, my pitch to my boys when I was writing this book was, hey, people are paid out there to do this. The people whose job it is to beat the market can't do it. Why would you think you can? If you've got another career, you've got a life, you've got family and other obligations, and how is it that you think you could dedicate your time to beating the market when the people whose job it is can't do it?
Right, yeah.
And then on top of that, on top of that, you're paying them an extra 1% or 1.5% not to beat the market. So it's like getting a worse product for higher fees.
Well, the fees are one of the big reasons that most actively managed funds don't beat the market, right?
Yeah.
You add into that transaction cost. The other thing is that I think people tend to forget about is that the more money, more capital that a fund has, the harder it becomes to beat the market. And it's even something Warren Buffett has said, that he has so much capital at Berkshire that it's going to be very hard for, he can't invest in a $100 million company. Yeah, it doesn't move the needle for him. Most actively managed funds, and particularly when you include all of the ones that have gone under, because there's so many mutual funds that no longer exist.
Yep.
So who do you, for your own investments, do you have a particular fund company or approach that you prefer?
I look to Vanguard first, just because their fees are so minimal. And I'll follow up on that. I'll give you a couple stats. You mentioned the fees that go under, but I think in the last 10 years, 7% of every actively managed fund has failed every year. And then over the last, I think it was 10 or 15 years, something, almost half of actively managed funds closed because of poor performance, to your point. So it's how can you pick the right one? But so I look to Vanguard, I think, for the indexes, the ETF indexes are, if assuming they're all the same product, if you can just limit the fees as much as you can. And then I've got, I'm a little bit limited in terms of what I can use in our firm's 401k. So I've got to strategically find which ones I want. But generally, I look to Vanguard first and go from there.
So what's your asset allocation, if I can ask you? Like, how much do you put in stocks versus bonds?
This is where I laugh because it's pretty aggressive. I wouldn't recommend this for everybody. It depends on your horizon and your risk tolerance and all that. But I'm pretty darn aggressive. So I think I'm around 40 to 45% domestic large cap, 10 to 15 domestic mid, 10 to 15 domestic small, and around 25% international, which only leaves, I don't know if you've done it, do the math, I think it's a couple percent in there for some bonds. But I'm not at the point yet where I feel like I've got to dial back.
Right.
I do know that the first time I have to do that here is going to be in the next couple of years for my oldest college savings plan. So I'm gonna have to start dialing back there, and I think it'll be a little painful because, I've always been just plug it in and be aggressive and let the long term do what it's going to do. So I'll have to start dialing that back, and I'm not looking forward to it.
You're not looking forward to bonds, huh?
No.
Yeah, but you have to with the 529. They have plans now that will do that all for you, but it sounds like you're taking the reins for your.
Well, obviously, the buy and hold is not sexy. As you like to hear people say, it's kind of boring. So if I can not do a target date allocation and do it myself, at least I still feel like I'm doing some sort of active something or other. But let me ask you a question. So my oldest is in 6th grade. When do I start dialing that back? I think it's probably in the next couple of years here.
Yeah. I mean, so I assume you're using the 529 in Texas?
Yep. No, I think it's Utah because I think in Texas you don't have to match where you are. I think Vanguard, it's actually through Vanguard, which is Utah. Yeah.
Well, and you don't have income tax in Texas, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so you don't get a tax break.
Yep. So if I didn't matter, I could pick any state.
Right. Well, you know what I would use, and of course, it's all over for us. We're done with that. But a lot of the 529s, I know in Virginia they do. They have a plan that will automatically reallocate the assets as your child gets older. And so what I would do is just look to those. Even if you're not using one of those plans, you're investing in it yourself. I would look to see what they're doing. I think by and large they've got it right. My recollection, in fact, I just did a podcast on 529s not that long ago, and I looked at it then. But I certainly think that there would definitely be a move more towards bonds by 5th grade. It may only be 25% bonds. I don't remember, but they were definitely, the allocation had shifted for sure by then.
Yes, I'm probably behind the curve.
You might be, but
probably another topic for you. That if you look at the target date funds, I know that across the industry there is no conformity. You look at a target date fund for 2055, and you could have any different fund company, 10, 15, 20 different pretty variable allocations. So even folks who invest in those probably have to pay attention to them because they're so different.
They are different. The various robo-advisors like Wealthfront and Betterment, their asset allocations are different. So there are definitely differences in all of these types of approaches. Although, in my view, maybe tell me if you disagree, but I think most of those differences, by and large, don't matter. I think it's important. I think it's perfectly fine to invest, at least to some degree, on personal preference. So for example, in your case, you mentioned you have exposure to a mid-cap fund and a small-cap fund, right?
Yep.
And that sounds like that fits your sort of investing style, and that's great. If someone else said, yeah, I'm just going to throw it all in an S&P 500, I wouldn't lose any sleep over that decision. And at the end of the day, I would suspect after 20 or 30 years, it's not going to make a huge difference. I mean, I have small-cap exposure because long-term they tend to do a little bit better. With a little more risk, of course, but so a lot of differences. But I still kind of the more I do this, the more I think all of those differences probably don't matter for most people.
I think you're probably right. I think for me it keeps it a little bit exciting. But to your point, you're right. That's when we going back to Warren Buffett. I think what he recommended was 90% in an S&P index and 10% bonds. So he didn't even go anything beyond two different asset classes.
And no international exposure.
Nothing at all. I don't think that's what he commented. So hey, he knows what he's doing. He's got to be doing something right.
Well, the interesting thing about that too is that I say no international exposure, although the companies in the S&P 500 do business all around the world. So
that's right.
And they have exposure to currencies and other things depending on their business. I just read today that Apple may be doing a a bond issue in not in dollars, in euros or other currencies, for example. So you do get international exposure in an S&P 500. But yeah, that was Warren's approach. Two funds and he's done.
Yeah, keep it simple. And to your point, I bet you're right. If you look at over long term, 20, 30 years, the returns probably won't be that much different. Although I do think probably you could lower risk and get the same returns. Maybe there's some benefit in doing it that and thinking of it from that perspective rather than returns. Think of it from the risk perspective.
Right. Well, I saw in your book you go into all that. You go into volatility and all of that stuff. I mean, there's some pretty heady concepts for a middle school kid.
And I think middle school, it's that's the beginning of it. And like I said, and the experts, the researchers who know about financial literacy and teaching financial education say that class doesn't work, reading books doesn't work. So that's a statement against my own interest, saying, "Man, my book's great." But I think the one of the key takeaways that people can have from the people who know the financial researchers are that rules of thumb work. So it's interesting. They say if you just give somebody a rule, rather than give them a week, 2 week, 3 week long class in depth of the underlying concept, the people who are just given the rule will end up doing better and have better recollection, and the material will be more sticky than those who got the whole class. So I think and that's why I included the simple rules of thumb in there. And this is why, the habits, the buy and hold, don't chase the market, don't invest emotionally. I think if people can remember these things, even if they don't get the details, those are at the end of the day what really matter.
Right, yeah. Well, rule of thumbs definitely help, and we explore a lot of them, and I like to kind of get behind the reasoning behind them. They're always, I think, a good start to understanding what can be a complicated financial decision. So you mentioned you have a whole chapter on negotiation. I thought that was interesting. Why'd you include that?
Well, yeah, I did that because I think I finally figured out in my life, aside from the work and kids, all the stuff, aside from the required things, what I'm really passionate about. One has always been negotiation and the art of persuasion, and the other is financial literacy. So finally, I can do something about the financial literacy. I can write a book, and I can hope to get it in front of nonprofits and things like that. And recently I accepted a position on the Texas affiliate of the National Council on Economic Education. So I can do something about financial literacy. But the other thing I'm passionate about, I love negotiating. I love the persuasion. Authors like Roger Dawson and Robert Cialdini, I love their stuff. And so I kind of wanted to put that in there too. I think that kind of ties into the budgeting and the savings concept, which is kind of everything is negotiable. And I've got my kids thinking along those lines too. Anytime you go anywhere, you might as well ask, because the worst that you can do is say no. And if you get something, then you're in good shape. So I wanted to include something in the book on that.
Right. And did you mention, was it Robert Cialdini?
Yes, Robert Cialdini.
Cialdini. Okay. Yeah, he wrote Influence, right?
That's right. Yeah, you've got a whole slew of books on influence and persuasion. There's actually I think it's an 11-minute little video. The videos online with the cartoon hand drawing and somebody in the background narrating. Yeah. He's got one for the readers out there, the listeners. I think it was six persuasion techniques by him, and it is a great little 10-minute video. Yeah,
he spoke at a conference. Excuse me, that I was at. He was very impressive. Very good. Very good. And then I read his book, although it's been a number of years now. I probably should go back and reread it, but that's a good book.
I've never met him, but I love his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So so you include negotiations, which I found was an interesting topic. Although who better to write it than a lawyer?
Well, fair enough.
Does your work require you to negotiate?
Well, I think every attorney's work does. I'm a transactional guy, so I think I'm negotiating all day long, pretty much.
Yeah, that's what you do for a living. So who better to write that? So you have a chapter on budgeting. Actually, that goes back to chapter 2. I'm curious, how do you budget?
So I kind of do it at the beginning of the year, and my budget's a little less detailed than it should be, probably. Which is my first line item, like I mentioned, is that 15% savings. And once I know I can do that, and we max out the 401ks and IRAs, then I think I'm okay, quote unquote, consuming the rest. I think and I finally only recently gotten to this point, and this kind of ties into my last chapter, which is kind of enjoy some of the stuff you've got now. If I look long term and my plan says, hey, if I'm saving my 15% and that's the 401k and I get the matches and I've got the IRAs in there, then the rest, if it gets consumed, is okay, because I'm okay with that 15% saving rate. I kind of think that's where I end up on that.
Right. And do you use any tools, any budgeting software? Or?
Yeah, Maggie, an Excel spreadsheet.
There you
That's
go.
it right there. Yeah.
I find a lot of people. Now, is it just your own Excel spreadsheet? Do you have a template that you
Yeah, I've got
use?
a template that I just kind of plug it in that way and tweak it as I go.
Did you create the template, or did you get it from somewhere?
I think I probably parroted it. I probably looked online and found some stuff. I created my own, but I can't say that it was an original thought in there.
Well, one thing, I don't know if you've experienced this. I've not been a consistent budgeter, at least in the sense of tracking spending. I kind of do what you do, and that is save first and then spend the rest. But this year I've been using YNAB, which is a budgeting tool. One of the things it seems sort of an obvious thing, but I didn't really appreciate it until I've been doing this now for, I guess, 10 months, is that as you collect spending data, it becomes really interesting to look at it. Mm-hmm. And it makes budgeting, going forward much, much easier as you see how you spend your money. And I've seen it even in the fluctuation of utility costs, for example, which, of course, I live in Virginia, so it fluctuates a lot depending on the season. And but just collecting all of that data and then putting it to use. I don't know. Do you have years of spending data, or do you not track it that way?
I don't know that I try. I think your comment, I bet I could benefit quite a bit from it. And see, you said where the spending goes from. I think I would probably say I see a lot of waste in there that probably could be eliminated.
Yeah, it's hard to look at sometimes.
Right? But it's tough. I mean, it really does. It's like I said, that last chapter in the book was tough for me to write. But when I think about savings, if I can knock down that 15-20% every year, and I can max out our plans, then that's what I'm planning on. Right, that my long-term plan is based on those numbers. So if everything else gets, choose your word, wasted, consumed, spent, whatever, I should be okay with that.
Right. Yeah. I like the approach too, because it's a more positive way of budgeting rather than always thinking about cutting back. The approach is, here's what I have to spend, and I can spend this without, feeling guilty. Or feeling like I'm not meeting my other goals because I've already set that money aside.
The different schools of thought, I'd be curious to see where you come on this, is you cut out your Starbucks lattes, and that's, $15-20 a week, and you cut out this, once a week bring your lunch to work, and that's $10 here, and pretty soon you're at $2,000. Hey, that's great, but a lot of people say just the opposite. Don't worry about the little things. It's the bigger things that matter. Do you have a thought on that?
Well, like so many of my own views of personal finance, I think it depends. I think if you are, if you have no debt, maybe other than a mortgage, and you're meeting all of your financial goals, retirement, 529, emergency fund, whatever, paying off your mortgage, you're meeting all of those goals, and then you're just sort of spending the rest. Yeah, to me, the little things don't matter. Yeah, if you want to enjoy Starbucks, why not? You're meeting all of your financial goals. On the other hand, if you're struggling with credit card debt and you've got school loans and you can't pay cash for your car,
every latte matters.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean the answer is don't ever go to Starbucks. But I do think in those situations, the small expenses that are repeated, day in and day out, week in and week out, probably do matter. That's my view.
It depends on the situation. I think that's probably a fair analysis.
Yeah. So, the other thing is sometimes we don't set our goals high enough. So like you might be meeting your goals and your goal is to retire at 67. But if
help me if I'm working.
Right. I was just throwing out a number. But if you cut back on some small things, maybe you could retire at 60. So you kind of have to just figure. Really, it comes down to figuring out what's important to you, I think.
Yeah.
But like your last chapter in the book, you got to live life, right?
You have to, and I think that's big. That's been my biggest barriers to allow those things to enjoy life. Go ahead and enjoy life. It's okay to do that.
Right. Well, so we talked a little bit about investing. I would just say this: the chapters on investing, I think, in your book are really good. I mean, you talk about risk versus reward. You're a big believer in low costs, which we preach here, because they can really zap your returns. And you kind of walk through the whole idea of diversification of different asset classes. Did you just sort of learn this on your own? Did you have someone teach this to you? I know you mentioned your father, but...
Oh, I think it's kind of just years of kind of organic learning, a little bit from my dad, a little bit from doing it myself, a little bit from reading, a little bit from reading folks like yourselves and all that stuff. And I do think at the end of the day, it's not. I don't know that it's not rocket science. It's just discipline and saying, hey, here, like we mentioned earlier, if there's 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 rules of thumb, good habits, just be disciplined about them and follow those, and that's what happens. And that's what I want to teach my kids, and kind of the word I want to get out in the financial literacy world. And this is not, none of this is original, right? I think it's just getting it in front of people.
Yeah. Well, are there any books that stand out in your mind that you read that really helped you understand the investing concepts that you write about?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Someone asked me that the other day, that you've got Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you've got some of Bogle stuff. Someone asked me, am I Boglehead? I was like, I imagine I probably am, but I don't know that I'm official. I've never registered on the site. But,
right.
The stuff that Bogle preaches, low cost, buy and hold, don't chase the markets, it's got to tie in, almost identically to the stuff that's in my book. But again, I don't know that is it an original thought? There's no kudos to me for coming up with that. This stuff's been out there forever. It's just a matter of people grabbing it and really believing it and buying into it, I think.
Right. Well, if folks want to get your book, where do they go?
Website is www.whatallkids.com. And that's actually same as my email. It's whatallkids@gmail.com, but it's available. They can go to that site, and they can actually, Amazon is the easiest thing to do, as a matter of fact. But the site links to Amazon. And then, as I mentioned before, we actually started recording here. Is for anybody out there who's got a library or a school or a nonprofit, go ahead and shoot me an email. I've kind of covenanted to discount the books to those type of groups, and I'm going to donate a portion of profits to nonprofits that focus on financial literacy as well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And do you have, maybe it'll come down the road, but do you have opportunities to speak to folks?
I have. I'm doing some locally. I guess that depends on how much legs it's got, how much it snowballs. But I've got a couple of local churches and synagogues I'm doing things to. And then here in Dallas, actually, the very close local library has a Friends of the Library program where they're running a series of seminars this summer, and they've got me inked up for one of them.
That's great. So that's got to be exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. You're kind of actually funny story. A quick 30-second version of a funny story. Kind of embarrassed myself. So I was talking to church, and one of them said, "All right, well, after we figure this out, let me know what kind of honorarium you'd like." And I had no clue what that word was. I didn't say anything. And so she repeated the question and said, "Let us know. We don't have too big a budget, but let me know." And so I said, "Oh, you want to pay me to come speak? This is great."
That's funny.
So it's starting to get moving, and I'm enjoying it.
So do you get nervous before you're about to speak in front of a group?
I do. It's funny. So speaking, you've probably seen this stat, more people fear public speaking than death, shockingly. It's crazy, and I still do. Even though I'm pretty good at it, I try and keep the audience interested. And you have to know your audience, right? So when I do it for kids, I have packs of gum and this that I give out, and for the adults, you have a little speaking of lattes, a $5 Starbucks gift card. Keeps people interested, and so they're not bored. But I still always get nervous.
Yeah, I do too. Although I find that once it starts and I start talking, the nerves go away.
I agree. And once it starts and you get out there and people are looking at you and you realize you're doing something that makes sense and works, it gets exciting and fun.
I was actually not terrified. That's not true. But I was pretty nervous the very first podcast I recorded. And the funny thing is, I'm here in my basement recording the podcast by myself. It's not live, right? I can always just stop and start all over again. Right. But there I was, nervous. That was about 130 episodes ago or so.
Hey, but this is my first participating in a podcast, and I have to say I was nervous too. So.
And you're just, sitting in your office talking on the phone?
That's right. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, right. So funny. Well, hey, listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. So the book, What All Kids Should Know About Saving and Investing, and Adults Too. Your site, whatallkids.com. It has links to, among other places, to Amazon where folks can get it. Or I guess they could just go to Amazon and search for What All Kids Should Know About Saving and Investing.
Plug in my last name and it'll pull it up. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. Well, anything else we should know about you? Any questions I didn't ask that I should have?
I actually wanted to give you one other stat when you mentioned low cost and fees and stuff. It's not about me, but it's curious. So the only, and this is actually Morningstar, the director of research at Morningstar said this, which is a little not shocking, but it should be telling, that the best indicator of performance of funds is low cost.
Yeah.
So, even Morningstar has, the 5-star ratings, and, everyone loves to look at those. Even they've said, hey, the only thing that predicts, performance of funds is low cost.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
It's just another one of those things that, don't waste money on high expense fees.
Absolutely. Love it. That's that was something I didn't appreciate when I first started investing, but I came to quickly understand. So important. All right, Rob. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Rob, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And to listeners, thanks, everybody.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview with Rob. Obviously, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to email me, dr@DoughRoller.net. You can check out Rob's website at whatallkids.com. You'll see links there where you can also get the book. Obviously, you can just go to Amazon, What All Kids Should Know About Saving and Investing by Rob Pivnick, Pivnick. But again, any questions at all, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, dr@DoughRoller.net. As you know, I read and respond to every single email I receive. So, hey, listen, I hope you have a great day. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Again, let me know if you have any questions. And remember, until next time, the absolute best thing money can buy is financial freedom.